Chapter 5: Creativity as a Survival Strategy. Why I write books, not for fame, but for clarity. Every page I write is one more fear filtered out, one more victory over the noise, one more step toward myself. In a world where far too many people are trying to be heard, I was silent for a long time. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I myself didn't understand why to speak. I began to write not when I wanted to become an author. I began to write when I felt I was falling apart inside. Writing is like talking to God, only a bit slower. When I first sat down to write, it wasn't about style, genre, or polished grammar. It was about survival. I was drowning in thoughts, fears, doubts, uncertainties, and I realized they would live inside me until I brought them out. The page became a mirror, and this mirror didn't lie. Writing meant listening to myself more attentively than ever before. I am not an author. I'm an explorer of the inner. I had no goal to write a bestseller. I didn't dream of fame. I simply craved to find clarity amid the noise. Each book I created wasn't an attempt to impress anyone, but an attempt to put myself back together. Because creativity is a form of internal therapy. And if you don't allow yourself space for expression, the body will start speaking for you, first with hints, then with pain. My formula: writing equals structure plus emotion minus excess. I wrote at night. I recorded voice notes in the car. I wrote in memos I'd email to myself. Because for me, written equals released. And also, when I see a thought on paper, I stop running from it. I either work with it or I let it go, but I no longer ignore it. Writing is my longevity in action. I'm convinced creativity is a form of the spiritual immune system. And if you don't give yourself space to express, the body will start speaking for you, first with hints, then with pain. That's why I write. And the more I write, the better I sleep, the steadier my blood pressure, the deeper my thoughts. Because creativity is not about a profession. It's about the ability to remain human when everything around wants to turn you into a survival machine. Conclusion: everyone should write their inner truth. Maybe you will never publish a book, but I'll tell you sincerely, that's not necessary. Writing is not for a publisher, it's for yourself. Even if no one reads it, it's important that you said it aloud. In the next section, I will devote attention to other forms of creativity. Because longevity is not just about the body, but about an expressed heart. And the heart wants to speak not only in words. Drawing, writing, visualization, exercises for the soul. The soul never stays silent. It either speaks through creativity or through pain. After I started writing books, it felt like I had released all the excess. But the soul is not a closet. You pull one thing out, something new appears. It turned out that writing alone wasn't enough for me, and so I picked up a paintbrush. Not for art, for survival. Drawing came to me not as a hobby, but as an instinct. As a way not to let myself disappear amid routine, worries, news, pressure, and constant musts. Drawing, not for exhibition, but for myself. I started with something simple, a black pen and a sheet of paper. Lines, splotches, abstractions, chaos. And the more I drew all of it out, the calmer I became. I noticed that when I can't formulate a thought in words, I can feel it with colors. Drawing became a form of meditation. Work for the hands, silence for the mind, space for the soul, and that's when an understanding was born in me. We are all creators, but not all of us allow ourselves to create. Visualization, it's not dream and it will come true. I'm not someone who believes that it's enough to hang a picture of a Ferrari on the fridge and it will appear in the driveway. But I know for sure, until you see your future, you won't have one. So I draw scenes, images, the covers of my not yet written books, schematics of new ideas, the architecture of upcoming projects. These are not just pictures, this is a firmware for the brain. When I see it, I believe it. And when I believe it, I act on it. Text and image, a double key to the subconscious. I combine text and drawing. For example, I draw a scene, and next to it, in one sentence, I write what it means. Or a poem, and next to it an associative image. This engages a deeper level of perception. It feels like I'm talking to myself in several languages at once. And, interestingly, I start to understand myself better. My longevity protocol isn't just about heart and liver, it's about preserving the inner fire, and fire dies when it's not allowed to burn. Drawing, as spiritual hygiene. Some people wash their face. I wash my soul. With drawing, sometimes it's like releasing emotions, sometimes like a chaotic confession, but after each such process, you feel cleansed. This is longevity, not just to live to old age, but to live in clarity and purity. And it's creativity in any form that helps you not drown in the outside world. Conclusion: allow yourself to create, and you will remember who you are. You don't have to be good at drawing. You don't have to publish what you write. Visualization doesn't mean believing in magic. But every time you bring something out from within, you return a piece of yourself to yourself. In the next section, I'll explain how creativity specifically helps me handle emotional surges that come not from physiology, but as a result of suppressed feelings. This is also part of the protocol, a part that saves. Why a creative person rarely gets sick, doesn't suffer from depression or senile apathy. The body wears out faster when the soul is bored. In the previous section, I talked about drawing, writing, and visualization as exercises for the soul. Now I want to explain why this is not just emotional entertainment, why creativity is true prevention of aging, and depression, and even illness. People often ask me where I get so much energy, why I so rarely get sick, why I can remain calm even when the world is upside down. My secret is not in a magic pill, it's in constant creative action. Creativity is movement for the brain. The worst thing you can do after 50 is settle down. That is, stop learning, stop seeking, stop creating. At that very moment, apathy arrives, and after it, ailments. Because the brain is not a hard drive. It doesn't just store, it transforms. And when you create, new neural connections spark in the brain, the prefrontal cortex lights up, the dopamine center activates. It's like an internal fireworks show. And it literally influences your physiology, stabilizes blood pressure, steadies the heart rhythm, even improves immunity. Stress, yes, but not the kind you think. Life always brings stress. The only question is, what kind? Creativity is constructive stress. It's when you're under strain, but you expand from it, rather than contract. Imagine a violinist playing a difficult piece. He's tense, but it's tension with meaning. It's the same for me. When I write, draw, invent, I'm in process. And that energy doesn't burn out, it transforms. But destructive stress is when you don't act, you just stew in your thoughts. And that's what exhausts. Immunity drops, vessels constrict, heart races. Result: illness, insomnia, depression. A creative person always has a reason to get out of bed. I noticed people most often get sick when they lose meaning. The meaning of life isn't philosophy, it's energy. And creativity is the shortest path to that meaning. When I know I want to write a new chapter, come up with a new idea, finish a painting, I wake up with curiosity. And curiosity is an elixir against old age apathy. It gives the desire to move, live, breathe. I'm not drawn to TV series, I don't get stuck in the past, I'm not glued to the news. I live in creating, not in consuming. Creativity as personal psychotherapy. In a world where everyone has their pain, the best therapy is creating. Write when it hurts. Draw when you can't speak. Imagine when reality presses too hard. This isn't suppression, it's cleansing. As children, we had crayons, clay, paints. But somewhere on the path to growing up, we forgot that these are tools for survival. I brought them back into my life, and I consider it my best decision. Conclusion: a creative person is a person who is alive. Some fear illness, some fear aging, some fear depression. But I believe the most frightening thing is to stop being alive inside. That's why, in my longevity protocol, creativity holds a key place, not as decoration, but as a daily practice of survival. The space where inspiration lives, silence, light, freedom. Inspiration is not a guest to be awaited, but a resident for whom you must create a home. After discovering the power of creativity as a survival practice, I realized one thing: Inspiration is not accidental. It's a state, and importantly, this state doesn't arise by itself, but in a certain environment. I searched for a long time to find in what conditions I create most deeply, honestly, powerfully. And I discovered 3 key ingredients: silence, light, freedom. Silence, the entry into yourself. We live in a world that constantly screams. And the louder it screams, the harder it is to hear yourself. I took a long time to get used to silence. It seemed threatening to me, because in silence, you can't hide. In it, everything becomes loud. Thoughts, doubts, true desires. But that's exactly what's needed to create not from noise, but from depth. When I first began consciously incorporating silence into my life, I noticed clarity appeared. Words seemed to lay themselves on the page. Images came into my mind of their own accord. Silence is not emptiness. It's fullness in which everything that truly matters can be heard. Light, external and internal. My workspace is always by a window. Natural light is for me like a source of life energy. I can't write in darkness. I can't think under a cold lamp. Light is a space without shadows, a space where thoughts don't tangle. Even when I work in the evening, I create warm, soft lighting for myself, as if I light a flame inside myself, and then the work begins. But even more important is the inner light, the one that appears after silence, after a deep conversation with yourself, after honestly answering the question, why am I doing this? When there's light inside, inspiration flows. Freedom, the best muse. I tried working under rigid constraints, deadlines, schedules, quotas. It worked, technically, but it killed the most important thing, the living sense of flow. Creativity doesn't tolerate violence, even if you're the one imposing it on yourself. I learned to give myself the freedom to make mistakes, to write imperfectly, to paint not for sale, but for the soul. Freedom is the space where not just a text or painting is born. Freedom is the state in which I begin to be myself. And it's in that state that true inspiration most often appears. I arranged a place where the soul unfurls its wings. It's not a designer office, not a perfectly sterile studio. It's my little nook with light, a favorite chair, a few books, a blank sheet, and silence. There's nothing superfluous, because the superfluous distracts. There, my longevity in action is born, because every minute in that space is a minute when I'm not just existing, but living fully. Conclusion: inspiration isn't found, it's grown. We often wait for inspiration to come, but it's standing outside the door, waiting for us to create a place for it. Silence, light and freedom, these prepare the ground. And that's why they are an integral part of my longevity protocol. Because life is not only biology, it's also a state of the soul. And you must work on the soul just as attentively as on the body.